Yes, yes, I can.
It's up now.
Thank
Yes, I
you.
can see.
You can't see it yet.
I can see it up now. It's off again.
All
Yeah,
right.
it's back on.
So let me be sure recording has started. All right. So welcome to day two class, right? So in the previous class, we looked at the fundamentals of AL, programming language. So we looked at the introduction, the important files, and we also looked at how we could set up the environment. So if you check the module two from the course outline I sent earlier this week, so you'll see that we are actually following it accordingly. So this is module two. So what module two is going to touch, we are going to look at the introduction. We are going to look at basics, AL basics, data types, right? So I'm going to be walking you through using this particular material. So in every programming language, which you can tell, all programming language has a way you can represent. I hope my voice is not echoing because I think my voice is echoing here.
It's not echoing. It's not echoing here.
Oh,
It's
all
fine,
right.
it's fine,
Clear
it's
as
fine.
day.
So, okay, thank you. Thank you. So we, in every programming language, we have a way of representing different types of variable. So when I say variable in programming language, variable simply means like just look at it like a container, or look at it like a storage, somewhere you can encapsulate or you can keep a specific data, right? So it's AL also supports data types, and in AL we have string, we have integer, we have decimal, we have array, we have list, and so on and so forth. So let's just follow through like this. So when I say identifier, right? If I'm talking about identifier, I'm talking about a specific name I'm using to represent a specific data type, right? Is that clear? So basically,
Yes, it's
if you
clear.
follow up, yeah. So if you follow up with the material, because I took time to do this actually. All right. So in the module, we are looking at identifier. So we said identifier is the name of the programming element, which I have stated. So it's more like something I use to represent a specific variable or a specific data type, so that at the end of the day, I will be able to make use or reference that particular variable. So what I just did here was, since I'm not like teaching someone that is new to programming, but just for the sake of the recording to be also um, to be useful for somebody that is actually new to the programming in general, so that I can also, all right, so that they can also benefit from this explanation. So there's something called syntax. So syntax is just more like is, let me say, is a way of expressing oneself when it comes to Business Central application language. So if I say an expression, if I say, let me just take for instance that if I want to represent go up, if I say if you press star 1 2 3, or let's take for instance in reality, so I can, assuming I'm using Ethel, maybe I just use star 1 2 3 hash. So there's a specific way of writing. So it's called syntax, right? So there's a specific way that when you represent your data in that specific way, it gives you some specific results. Syntax describe the grammatical rules for using those identifier, right? Now we've looked at identifier, we've looked at syntax. Now variable, which is the most important one. We use this name interchangeably. I can say identifier, I can say variable. Although variable might mean something more in terms of programming language. because variable is just a specific location in the memory, right? So it's just more like, let's say I have three files or three pictures. These three pictures, the first one is named picture A, the second one is picture B, picture C, respectively, like that. So I already know that's my identifier. If I want to identify these three pictures, I already know the name, which is the identifier. That's picture one, picture two, picture three. So when I now talk about variable in this essence, is that where actually is this picture one located at? I can now say maybe my C drive, maybe my D drive, maybe on my desktop or my document folder. So that is actually what variable actually represents. It just represents a memory location whereby those particular data are being saved. So in other ends, we have talked about identifier, syntax, and variable. So let's move. All right, so when defining a variable, like I said, I can call a variable as an identifier. I can call an identifier as a variable. So we have, when you are defining a variable by an identifier, the first character is preferably an underscore. So this shows you that when I want to declare a variable, I could start the declaration by using underscore, or I use when you use a special character or a space in an identifier, you must enclose them. You must enclose the identifier with a double quotation mark. So I think I'm just going to give an example. So this is what we're going to do. So just like we did the last time, I think we created. So this is what we are going to do. All right, so let me Control Shift P. So I want to use the AL Go, or I want to come to the view and come to my command palette and click on that, right? So I want to click on AL Go. Now, because this is the lecture actually started, the journey of being an AL developer has actually started. So it's okay for us referring to all the time when we are doing a follow-up on this class, right? So Control Shift P again, AL Go. So now let's actually give it a folder name. So let's say right. So just for it AL developer project as the name of the folder. And the last time I said it's more advisable for you to use a version before the earliest version, just because of in case there are bugs or issue with the latest wave release. So we are going to go with the 13.0. So I want to connect to my server here. I also want to delete this folder. All right. So the next thing we will do here is for us to download the symbol, right? But before we download the symbol, I also want to introduce some best practices when it comes to structuring your folder. So I'm going to be creating a folder called source. So within my source, what this represents is just that whatever extension I want to create would be inside my source. So for my source, I want to now create other folders. I want to create a folder for page. This hold all the pages for my extension customization. So I want to also create another folder for page extension. Right? So respectively, I'll create for table and the rest. So table and table extension. So let me just pluralize this. Yes. Right. So at this point, okay, so I don't want to fast forward so that I stick to what we started. So now we were talking about variable, and we said that to declare a proper variable in AL language, it needs to follow a specific syntax. So the syntax being that there has to be a declaration. So when I want to declare a variable, I use the keyword var, just like the way, var representing variable, right? So I want to give an identifier. Let's say I want to create a variable that holds age. So I want to say age, and what that particular passage was telling us is that in order for us to create an identifier, we could actually begin an identifier with an underscore. I can say age, if they need be, if I want to create it this way, or I could just simply say age. So I can't start my identifier as one, age, but I can create something and say age one. All right, so I can start my identifier by using underscore, or I use my letters, right? So a simple variable here is age. Then I want to use this column, right? Then I want to give the data type. Like I said, we have different data types. We have the integer, we have the decimal, we have the string, we have array, we have JSON objects, and so on and so forth. So for this example, let's say I want to declare an integer, right? Then a semicolon. So this is like a proper way for declaring a variable in Business Central, right? So they are also, this is also called, depending on where I have this declaration, we have the global variable, and we also have the local variable. We're going to be looking at the local variable soon. So let me go back to material, right? So we also said that, so you can see this part where we said we can also put a space while declaring the variable. So that means that I can't begin a variable with space, but within my space, let's say I want to create something called first name, but I want to represent it this way instead of saying first name as an identifier. So I want to create this as a first name. What I can do is I just make sure I put a string around it, right? And then I say, let's say this is a text, right? So in this example, we have seen that we can create a variable or an identifier with an underscore, right? So you will see that when I was declaring this particular identifier, I use this square brackets. So what this represents is that, and then you will see in some examples whereby I declare an identifier as text, but I still include this square brackets. So what the square bracket actually does is that when I say I'm creating an identifier for code, I have to put the specific length. So for this example, let's say I want to create a name, but the total length of that name that the name can actually collect is 10. So when I put a name longer than 10 characters, the system is going to throw an error, right? So we've seen that we can actually create a variable using underscore. We can actually use the normal character, and we can also use a quotation to declare a variable. So we said application language is not case sensitive. So what this means actually is that while developing, when I want to access this underscore name, I could access it by even saying maybe hello Bola.
Yeah, hello. Sorry,
Hello.
please. Hello, I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, I
Sorry,
can
my
hear you
internet
now.
Yeah, we
connection
can
is
hear
bad.
you.
Sorry.
Okay. Okay. All right. So let me just continue. The class is being recorded. You can always watch it at your convenience time. So I wanted to say something. I've forgotten what I wanted to say. So when I want to access this particular identifier that are already declared, I could actually access it by saying name, right? AL still represents this same name as this name. So that is why we said it is not case sensitive at all. So I could even mix it together and then go like this name is still going to give me the value of the specific name. Right. So let's see. So now they gave us a recommendation, and this recommendation, this is what actually works in so many programming language that I actually know. So we recommend that you create an identifier with a Pascal case, which means that the first letter would be capital, and any letter that is suffixing that particular variable could also be in a uppercase, right? So let's just give a typical example and say instead of me saying this first name, I could have declared the first name as right. So this makes this is a good practice. So it doesn't mean I can't declare my first name anyhow. I could do it anyhow. The code would work the way it ought to work, but just for convention sake. So and to also make your code look neat and fine. So they advise that we also use a common case to represent our identifier or our variable. All right, so let's move to the next. All right. So this in reality, before you can use something, you have to like have it. I can not. I wanted to use an analogy that doesn't really make sense, but at least it will complete the gap. Just take for instance, like I crave to eat egg, right? Let's say I don't have means of getting egg. It means being that maybe I can't borrow it from someone. I don't have access to egg, you know. So I can't eat what I can't access, right? Yeah. So that's actually what came to my mind here. So if I want to declare, before I can use a variable, I have to first declare it first. I have to let the memory know that, guys, I will be in need of these specific variables before I can use it. So he said, I have to have an identifier, and then it has to have like a scope. A scope being, is it a global variable? Is it a local variable? Then it has to have a data type, right? So the data type would be integer, string, code, blah, 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 and so on and so forth. Then it also needs to be initialized. So we'll go through all of this, right? So I'm going to erase all of this. Now, so let's actually work with an actual file. So save. So I want to come to my table. Then I want to create a new file. So this file, because in the future we'll be working with student record, right? So this is what we are going to be building on top of. We are going to be building on top of this student record. And so I want to name this student profile. Now, when naming a file name in Business Central, I'm just giving you a good practice, right? You can give this is the name of the record I want to create. So it's okay for me to give this first. Then some people do it this way. The ID of the particular table, they put it first. Like where I currently work, we do it this way. This is TAB for table, then underscore the ID. Let's say I'm naming this record ID 5100. Then I can now say underscore the name of the record, which is student profile, right? .al. I could do this naming convention, or the other one saying that I can say student profile dot table dot al. So whichever one works well for you, you make use of it. So the first example I actually did would save you a lot of time in terms of generating new ID for other table. You already know which ID has been used and which ID is remaining for you to use. All right, so I'm going to go with the first one, TAB underscore. So I actually want to name this record 5100, right? Underscore students profile.al, right? Then enter. So one thing we have not done here is remember the app.json. We want to make sure that our ID range is starting from the 5100 to, let's say, for this particular project, we just want to make use of this range between 5100 to 5200. And I save this. All right, so I'm going back to the file. Then if you can remember from the last class, I think we need to first of all download simple. Okay. Size of clear credential. Then I need to okay, this is, I'm actually using a specific um, 4.3. All right, so Control Shift P, download symbol. So all right, so yeah. Let me quickly pull on.
No. Um,
Is the meeting over or I'm just the one not hearing anything?
hear you.
Yeah, sorry about that. My network is fluctuating. So I'll share my screen now.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, I can see your screen.
All right, so we're about downloading the symbol. So I said that for us to create a table snippet, a short way to do that is to actually type in TT. TT being a table snippet. As you can see, we have a snippet here. It's going to create a structure for creating a table. So I can either click on it or click enter. So this is why I have currently, remember that while we were creating this particular table, we said the table ID is going to be 5100. So let's do that first. So I'm going to say this is 5100. Right. Then we said we're going to name the record students profile. Right. So we are not coming into here at the moment. So our symbol has been downloaded successfully.
Sorry, are you
So
recording? Are you still recording?
You said? Can I
Are you
confirm we're still recording? Yeah,
Yes, it's still recording. Yes, we are still recording.
I am still
Okay,
okay.
okay,
Thank
fine.
you, Anu. All right. So you would see that for now, let's not look at this place. We are still going to get there, right? So we are still talking about variable. You can see where this variable was defined. This is my int, right? So whenever I make any declaration at this point, or let's say below the trigger, well, it's always advisable to follow this particular structure, right? Whatever global variable I want to define, it's okay for me to define them at this point, right? So we were actually talking about something that brought us there, right? So we talked about when working with variable, it must have an identifier, it must have a scope, it must have a data type, and before we can use it, it must be initialized, right? So let's look at it this way. Now let's go back to our environment. So I can press Ctrl B, a shortcut to hide my tab, right? So I want to come under the var. So they said it must have an identification. So let's say I want to create a variable called my name, right? So my name is, they said it must also have what? A data type. So this is a text, right? And then it must have a scope. This is the scope. This is a global variable. Now, the scope here is global variable. And then we have the type as text and the identifier as my name, right? So whenever I want to now use this particular my name, let's say, for instance, just neglect this. Now I want to now say my name is equals to Daniel, right? So I have actually initialized my name to Daniel, right? So you see the sequence of that particular process, starting from me giving an identifier, giving a data type, and making sure it's within a scope. For this example, it's a global scope, and then initialized a value to my variable, right? So we can do the reading here. So at this point, I highlighted some examples of global variable which we have actually done, and then we could also have some local variable. So local variable in the sense that it can only work within a specific region. So look, for example, this particular field called my field. I could, within this my field, declare a variable. Forget the fact that I'm also using this var here, right? Var is just more like a variable. And in some cases, it means something else, right? So let's say it is age. I want to declare a local variable called age, and I'm saying this is integer. So this is an example of declaration of local variable. So declaration of local variable would be that I wrote a function, and then within the function I have some declaration. Let's say to declare a function in Business Central, we make use of procedure, right? So it could have a prefix before that. It could be a local variable, a local function, or it could be internal procedure, it could be protected, it could be extended, right? So it could be protected, local, and internal. So we'll get into their definition in full, but just for us to portray an example of local variable. So let's see, hello world, right? So within this my function, which is a local variable, I want to declare a variable called age. The same age. You can see that I have declared a local variable up, and here I'm also declaring another local variable called age. So this way, AL compilers knows that this age is different from that particular age, unless I have a global variable called age, right? Then at this point, I have a global variable called age, but I also have some local variables called age, right? So I believe we already know how to create a variable and represent them respectively. All right, so I'm just trying to rush it because I've actually wasted time. All right, so actually, so that is the introduction to data types in Business Central. So it's also important for us to, I think the last time we partially talked about document ID range. Did we?
Yes, we did.
All right, so the document ID range, what it does is that it only helps us to know what ID range is within our reach, because we have category of those ID range. So we discovered that 0 to 49,999 is being used by the system application, right? Whatever customization Business Central had already done out of the box, they are using the ID within this range. So therefore, when doing our development, we cannot use any of these IDs, right? So then Business Central gave us for customization for testing purposes, right? If I want to do my customization, I want to publish to a specific tenant, right? So I can use between the range of 50,000 to 99,999. So other IDs, which is 100 to 100,000 to 999,000, they are being used by, you can see Microsoft Team Localized Business Central, right? And okay, so we have 1 million to 69, blah blah blah. So these are reserved for registered solution program. Those are Microsoft partner. When I want to start developing on App Store, so Microsoft are going to assign me a specific ID. So you can see partner can obtain ID within this range, 70,000 to 70 million to 74 million, right? So you can do the reading yourself. So those ID will be used within all our objects. That's starting from our tables, page, report, code unit, queries, interface. Yeah. All right. So then we have talked about table, right? So table, which is from the definition here, we said tables are the core objects used to store data in Business Central, right? You ever wonder that whatever thing you have been, you've been interacting with the front end, which is the front end, the functional part of Business Central, or you ever wonder that how are all these records being stored? How are they being represented? So with the help of table is standing as our database, right? So that is why when we are creating the table, we are creating individual fields that will make up that specific table. So primarily without the table, we can actually still use page, because we can also still represent. That means that we don't plan to keep the record that we are actually storing on the front end, right? We can still use page without table, right? So it just only means that we are not backing up whatever we are saving at this point. All right, so the structure of a table has 4 columns. As you can already see, the first block contains metadata. So let's look at it. While we define this table, you'd see that there are some properties at this point. So the properties we define here are called metadata. I can go ahead and say I want to create a caption. So metadata are data that actually define your record or your table. So I'm just giving more details on student profile. I'm creating a caption. I'm saying probably this is student profile. Maybe I want to give it an addition record, right? So I can go further by saying I want to actually describe this particular record. I just give a short description what this record does. From there, you already see what metadata actually means. So this, with all these attributes that I keep on adding at this section, I'm giving more definition to my student record or student profile. I'm giving more explanation or more details to the record I am actually creating. So this is the first section, right? The metadata. So let's go. Let's see the next one. The field section, right? Now, when I'm creating a record, those components that makes up a record are the fields. So those are like properties. So maybe let's say the first field I want to create is matric number, which is going to be like, right? We all know what matric number is. At least we are Nigerian. We're all in Nigeria, right? So when I say matric number, I'm creating a field that will give more definition to my record, right? So I can create something that can hold age, full name, gender, and so on and so forth. Whatever details that would make up my my record, right? So you see at this point we are having that this specific record is red, and then if you look at this right hand side, you see that we're having a lined red, and if I come over here, you see that we are having a sign that we are having a specific error. So when I over this, you see the reason. They said references my field in the application object student profile does not exist, meaning that within my definition for this record, the compiler cannot find any record called my field, any field called my field, or any variable called my field. And I want to use it as the primary key for this record. So I remove this. For a student record, it is what would be the important property or important details that we can use, that will be unique, that we can use as a primary key. Do we all know what primary key means?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so what can we use? Let's interact a little bit. What can we use that is unique in a student's record as an identification for that specific student?
A matric number would do.
All right, so we can go ahead and say matric number. Thank you. All right, so what I'm just saying is that whenever I want to access this record, I know that for sure I can have 2 Aziz in a specific record. I can have 3 Ayo in a specific record. But I want to be able to distinguish between all of this record by their matric number. That means that matric number is going to be unique regardless of any number of records that will be created using this record. And in another sense, it also means that whenever I want to access this specific record, for fast retrieving of my data, I can easily rely on my primary key because it is unique. When I search for IO, if I have 55 or let's say 1 million IO in my record, it is going to pull unnecessary data for me. But when I'm specific on my primary key, I say I only want matric number SCI 15161035. Then it's only spool the specific record I have put in my filter. Right? So with all of this explanation, I'm taking my time so that I can actually touch all of these properties so that when you're developing, actually you know why and how you use some certain things. And it will also help you when you're troubleshooting, when you come across any error. All right. So you can also go ahead, read this. And so we said we have touched the field section. Then we now have a section for the keys, which we have actually talked about. So the final section details the trigger and the code that runs in the table. This is a very important one. Triggers in Business Central, because this is where all your logic, all your transformation, all your updates, all your manipulation, this is where you can start to execute them. So in Business Central, we have different level of trigger. We have triggers that actually are responsible for the insertion, for the delete, modification, or rename of a specific record. So those triggers are, we can also refer to them as events, because when an insertion occurs, it means that an event has actually occurred, right? When a user tries to put in a name inside a specific field, I am trying to insert. So this event would always occur. You can see how it is defined, triggered on insert, right? So whatever happened on the front end that causes a record to be initialized, this event would be triggered, right? Let's now say it has been triggered already. We already have a record. Then trigger and modify would also trigger, right? Because let's say I am trying to insert another content in a specific field on that same record. So on modification, of course, I try to delete the record. So we are going to actually work with this real life and see how all of those flows goes. Then we now have triggers that occur in a field level. You know, we call all of this field, which are properties that define the specific record. So what I have done here, I created a trigger on validates. For somebody coming from the area of web development, it's just like on inputs, on focus, on mouse in, you get. So these are triggers that, okay, when a user comes into this particular field, matric number, and probably just focus on it or it types anything, validation should occur. And this validation only occurs based on the logic we put in here, right? So we'll still actually touch in depth on that. Is this explanation clear?
Yes, sir.
All right, thanks. All right, so we also have some properties inside the metadata, right? This is called extensible. So just for future purpose, Business Central gives us the flexibility to extend this base application, what they have actually built. That is why we can write a customization on customer record, on vendor record, or whatever standard record we meet. So, but if I do not want my record to be extendable, I don't want someone else to extend my record, I can say extensible is what equals to false, right? In other way again, let's say I am not yet certain the number of fields I will need for this project. I can also say there is a function. So I can always rely on my control space IntelliSense to give me options. So I can scroll to them and see what I want to use. So what's the name? I think it is called, okay, table type. So with the table type, I can give, so we have different type of table. I can give, by default, it's like a normal table. But if I want to say whatever record I am, because I'm still in a testing stage, I do not want the system to save whatever I'm doing at the moment. So I can give the table type temporary, right? So this is that. And let me just remove this extensible because I want it to be extensible. So that is that. Now, so let's now go into default values of fields, right? There's no much difference in any other language. For integer, the default value will be 0. For decimal, it's also going to be 0, right? For text, is going to be string. So these are going to be like their default value. For an array, it's just going to be an empty array, right? And so on and so forth. So these are like the default value for Boolean, right? True or false. So by default, it's going to be false, right? And so these are like default value for fields or for variables, actually, for those data types. Okay, so now I gave an example, a typical example of a record called student record, right? So, and I gave all of this definition. We have actually looked at how to create it from our end. So there are some important sections on the table that we need to know. So let's go into that actually. Okay, sorry. I know we are exhausted, but I just want us to finish this module. So, we are moving on to, because I know that we don't have the patience to wait till we start the real work. Okay, so I defined this as the primary key. What makes this a primary key? When we have the declaration clustered equals true, this makes a definition. When I'm working with keys, this makes this key a primary key. So you might have the question, what if I want to create some other secondary keys that are important to this record? How do I do that? So I can also do that by, let me just copy this. So it also have a name, key 2. You can give it whatever name you want to best represent it. So I want to create so I need to remove this clustered, right? By default, clustered is equals false. So let's say I have matric number, I have text name, she's a text. So the first name should not exceed 50 characters. So you can see that I am giving, this field is taking 3 arguments. We have the ID, the identifier, and the data type. ID, identifier, data type. So we'll talk about this soon. And let's see, I want to make my secondary key. I want to make it my first name. So I can always rely on my IntelliSense by clicking on Control Space. It gives me option of the field that I have actually created. So you can see this PK1. This PK1 means primary key, right? So when I make this the secondary, this way I have created a secondary key. All right. So this one, the explanation might not be clear for now, but I am going to show you why it is always important to give a field group, right? So we have 2 different types of field group. We have the block, we have the drop down. So we are just going to follow along and do this. Then at the end of the day, maybe when we get to module 3, I'll start to explain the importance of all of this. But it's important for me to also explain it at this point. So when I'm explaining it at that point, it becomes more clear. All right, so I can always rely on my IntelliSense. So field group. So what group? You can see the definition already. Field group, it has a name and a field. So that means from the default names that it has, which I said it has 2, it has a block and drop down. So I can also still rely on my I can also still rely on this. So you can see we have break and drop down. So let's say the first one I want to create with drop down. And the drop down, I want to create. So this one actually, this is what it does. I'll explain it now. It will not make sense. I'll still explain it later. So I think I should just go to the front end and showcase what that does. I think that will make sense. Hold on. I want to be sure the environment is going to bring, so I don't share that content here. All right. This was. All right. So that will be okay. Seems that. Confirm you can still see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, we'll soon end the section. Sorry for the time.
Yeah, I
Uh,
can.
so okay, so this is a typical example. What this is doing here is that when I choose a type item, it automatically gives me access to see the list of items that are on the system. So when I click on this drop down, can you see that we have some specific column here? Number, description, base unit of measurement, unit price. So this is on drop down. So that field group drop down, this is what it does. What information do I want to show whenever this record is being drilled down? Does it make sense?
Yes, sir, it does.
Do you get it?
Yes, we do, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So that is the importance of that. If I don't do that, by default, what the system is going to do is that the primary key would be the one to show. So that is why sometimes you see that you only have NO record showing when you table relate or you drill down on a specific record. So that is because that's the instruction you have given. The system is only using the defaults. But when you now explicitly say, yes, when the customer drill down, I want them to be able to see the number, the description, the base unit of measurements, and the unit price. So the brick, also, it helps in formatting the information. Can you see that we have different type of view here? I have the list, I have the type. When I come to the type, also, what information do I want to see at this point? So the brick also helps me to do that. So you see why it is very important. I can remember some years back while we just started customizing, we used to have that issue. We'll be like, why are some field? We want the user to actually see this field, but they can't see it. You get. So we were thinking at that point that it was a functional problem. Maybe we have to do some configuration on the front end. Meanwhile, it's just a line of code actually that would have fixed that issue. So for this record, for this example, I want the matric number to be, so I can also show the arrangement. I could show the first name first before matric number. So, oh shit. First name, right? So it only takes this curly brass and that is all. So I want to copy the same thing and also provide a brick details. So brick. All right. So technically, we have actually touched whatever component that makes up a table. We started by this table definition, ID, the record name. We also looked at the naming convention of the file and the file folders. So we also look at metadata, data that actually define the record. Then we started with the definition of fields. We talked about triggers, we talked about keys, and we also looked at field groups. All right, so in other ways, you can also look at it like a way to group your field, right? So let's see what is left here. I think we are almost done. File naming. Okay, we have actually talked about file naming. So you can do well to do more reading on this. So what we have not actually done is namespace. So like I said the last time, namespace is a new feature. And what it actually does is important. So it's namespace is used to organize.
Hello? Hello?
Hello, hello, I can't hear you.
So,
It's breaking.
sorry,
Hold
can
on.
you recap? Just start from the namespace. It was breaking
So
while we were
namespace is
talking.
used to organize your
Am I still audible?
project. Yeah, you're audible.
You said?
Yeah, you're back on.
All right. So I'll just rush this. I'll rush this. So we might not go into the in-depth definition for now, but I'm going to rush. Oh shit. Let me see. Is it gone? No, it's gone yet. All right. Sorry about my language. So this definition. So it means that. So what this namespace actually does in any project. Let's say I am creating customization that will only affect finance, right? Or that is going to actually touch on particular sector of business operation. So it means that I will be able to create a category. Just look at namespace as a way of categorizing your customization. So this one now is student record. So I can say education. So I can create a namespace. So let's say because of student profile is a record that I can find under education. So let's say education, right? So it means that whenever I want to now make use of this, so look at it like library or modules, whereby I can just say if it's PHP, something like that, include blah, blah, blah. So just look at it that way. Now, I'm saying this is an education, right? But this is a student's profile. Right? It's a mode under education, right? It's an education customization. But this specific one is called student profile, right? So just, I don't know if that explanation works for naming a namespace. Does that make sense?
Well, sorry, can I say something?
I didn't get you. Please come again.
Okay, I said namespaces, it was confusing at first because namespaces in other programming languages that I've used, they mean something else. So,
Yes.
they mean entirely different things. But here, I think is a way of making a particular should I call it customization into a module that you can use in any other
Exactly.
it gives it
So
it gives it power to be imported.
exactly.
All right.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we can go in to take the material, read it, and then if we have any question, you ask. So if there's any questions so far, so we can entertain question before leaving. I think we have spent more than an hour here on the call. So I can go ahead and entertain questions.